local area adjustment tools in Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. Their new name is Mask Tools, or Masking. Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom are the same functionality, but Lightroom works a little differently the way it looks to the user. I'll go back and forth between them, so if you have one or the other, hopefully you'll see something you're familiar with. But in general, not long ago, everyone said do as much as you can in Adobe Camera Raw globally, meaning whatever changes affect the entire image, and then go into Photoshop to do local adjustments to parts of the image. Well, now you can do all the local adjustments you'd like to do in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw before you even go to Photoshop. That's what we'll cover here today. And this works on both RAW files or JPEGs, doesn't matter. You'll get more out of a RAW file, but that's a whole nother topic. So let's look at the masking. In Lightroom, there's the toolbar here has this circle with dashes or dots around it. That is masking. If I switch to Photoshop, you'll see this is the masking up here. Okay, it starts out this way. You'll usually open it and see these sliders, but if you click on this, you'll get to the masking panel. Now there are several presets already, which are very good. Subject, sky, background, objects, and even people. And you can see it has already found each individual person. And if I just hover the mouse over these, you can see what the selection it has chosen for all the people, just this guy, any one of them. So you could select any one of those and create a new mask and modify just that person or everyone. Pretty nice and very accurate. You could also just select subject, and that does, in this case, the same thing as all people. You can see it did a pretty good job. And what it did up here is create this mask, and what's in white will be affected by whatever I do with the sliders down here. And you can see what's in white are the subject, or the guys in this case. Then you can do whatever you'd like with the all the sliders that are available, and there's a lot of things you can do, including texture, clarity, even sharpness and noise reduction, color, and of course the basic exposure options available. So let's say I wanted to, now it looks like since they're highlighted in red, I'm not going to be able to tell what I'm doing when I make a change. But the minute you move a slider, that red goes away. So I'm going to just brighten them up a bit. So that helps. Okay. So that's the preset for subject. But if I want to create a new mask, and you can have multiple masks on the same image, doesn't matter. So I'll do create new mask, and let's try just the sky only, and just the sky. It's very good. Let's create another mask and pick background. So this is everything but the subject, and look how good that is. So if I wanted to just change the background, that's the white part in this mask icon, everything that's red, then I can now just move a slider, bring that down however you'd like. Any of these sliders you can work with. Okay, so we've done subject, sky, background. Objects is, in this case, will be the same as subject, and we've seen that it has selected people. So those are the presets. Now before I go any further, I'm going to show you something else. Down here there's this preset field. Okay, when you have, this is the mask I have selected up here, mask 3. Presets, there aren't any. All right, now you can add your own and make some, but this is the one difference between Photoshop or Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom. If you come to Lightroom and do that same thing, click on masking, and let's just say subject, doesn't matter. Now, and we've made this mask, here's this, they call it effect here instead of preset, and it looks like you can't click on it, but you can, custom. All these presets are available. Automatically change the sharpness, the blacks, highlights, and so on. So there are a lot more presets you can choose from. Now these presets, let's try blacks and see if we can tell. Yeah, it brought up the blacks. So these presets are for modifications you want to make. These presets are for selections you want to make. Okay? That's the difference, only difference I've seen between Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. And I'll go back to Adobe Camera Raw. Let's look at some of the other tools available then. When you create a new mask, you also have linear gradient. Let's try this. Now, I've selected linear gradient. Anywhere when I move the mouse over the picture, I get this crosshairs, and I hold and drag the left mouse button. You can see I can move this any way I want, but I want it perfectly level. I'm creating a gradient, or a linear gradient they call it, meaning it's flat and straight, and I let go of my mouse. So the change is going to affect this area in red and gradually fade out until here, where it will no longer affect the image at all. Now I can take these lines and make the gradient narrower, which is what I would probably want to do in this case. You don't want them so tight like this it's going to look like a straight line and it will be obvious to the viewer. You make it like this and it's nice and soft transition from all of the effect to none of the effect. Later, if you want to move it, you can just grab the center button and move it around. Okay, if you want to rotate it, move your mouse until you see this down here and do that. And then, like the others, anywhere I change a slider, I change, there we go. All right. But let's say, now if you want to delete one, this one is selected already because I can see the lines. I'm just going to hit the delete key. Okay, so that's easy to do. But for the linear gradient, there's another trick. This horizon is horizontal, so I want a pretty straight line horizontally. If I hold the shift key and add this linear gradient, so I'm going to click and drag with the shift key held, I can't, it's going to stay straight. As long as I stay close to straight, it will do the same. I'm going to hit delete key. If I start the gradient moving left to right, it'll keep it straight that way, holding the shift key. Now it tries to, you can keep going around the dial. Anywhere you go, holding the shift key will hold it straight, but usually vertically or horizontally are the most used. All right, so that'll help. You can also add or subtract to a mask. So let's say I'm going to put this linear gradient here again. Let's say we want to darken the water. I'll bring it all the way down here, move it a little further. Now the problem is what? Their heads are also going to be affected all the way down to mid-torso there. I don't want that. So I can now subtract from this mask using a brush. Using any one of those things you could see. I'm going to use the bracket keys to reduce the size. Actually, I'll come down here and reduce the feather as well. Alright, so that is what I'm going to get. Make it even smaller. And then now I can, wherever I paint, as long as I'm going to move my flow up a little bit so it happens faster. Since limited time here, you can see the red is coming off. Okay, so you can modify the masks this way. Make it smaller so I don't go outside the color outside the lines. Most important things are probably their faces, but alright, so you can see how I can make a linear gradient and still modify it to be abstract in shape, and then these things won't be affected. Now you can see I went outside of his face there, so I could add back with a brush. Okay, that's rough, but just to show you how you can add and subtract here. That's very useful. Okay, what else can we do? Let's just get rid of this. If you want to delete a mask, just come over to these three dots, and you can delete the mask. You can see also if you want to duplicate it, you could do that and do something else in the same area, which sometimes comes in handy. You might be surprised. And even better, if I want to change everything but what I just did, I can duplicate it and invert the mask. In that case, I'm going to delete this one. Everything would have been masked at the bottom instead of the top. So they're handy little shortcuts. But let's create a new mask with a brush. Okay, and in this case, let's switch to a different image. In fact, I'll go over to Lightroom to do that. And let's try this one, let's say. Okay, so over here, masking is here. And now if I select brush, I get this brush, you can see. Again, I'll change the size with the bracket key. Let's bring the feather down a little bit too. Okay, now everywhere I paint, you just show the overlay there. This little box here turns on and off this red if you don't want to see it. It will. I am masking the area I'm painting. Now if you watch, go up here, it's not painting the sky, even though the circle is well outside the sky. The trick is to keep the plus sign in the center on the subject you want, and then it will not go outside that subject. If it sees high contrast, you can see here in the trees it did, because the contrast is too close. As long as this over here is checked, auto mask. Let's uncheck that, and if I paint again over here, you'll see it just paints in the sky, even though the X never left the building. I want to undo that. Alright, so now with a brush I painted an object that's not clearly round or any geometric shape, some abnormal shape, and I can again change the values. Aren't any highlights to change, but that does bring it up a little bit, and I can do whatever I want. Okay, what this might be really useful for is portrait retouching as well. You can select the model's skin and then apply a skin softening preset, or come down to clarity and reduce the clarity and make it look a little softer. You could enhance black and white photos by making, maybe if I made this black and white, let me turn off the overlay, I could increase the texture and clarity just of the church, just so it kind of stands out, or leave it this way, leave it as a color image, and select everything but the church and desaturate it so the church stands out in color and the rest is black and white. Any combination thereof. Now when it comes to using the brush, a good thing to know is, let's get rid of this mask so I can start over. These two sliders, flow and density. Now right now flow is at 100, so when I paint on there, got to show that mask overlay. When I paint, it's about as deep as red as it's going to get. I can keep retouching it, hitting the mouse and repainting it, and it doesn't get any more red, more dense, so to say. So let's get rid of that again. If I select the brush, now I bring the density down to, let's say, 55%, okay, and paint. Now maybe it's hard to tell, this is not as dense as it was. Well, I can show you by moving the density back up. Now it gets more dense, more red. So in other words, the effect that I would apply to this area would have less effect if my density was down to 50 or anything less than 100. And of course, the less you do, the less effect. Now, what is flow? Well, flow, let's say if I do this at 25%, and again I'm going to delete that and start over. Whoops. Hit the wrong thing. Let's do brush. Now when I paint, show that overlay, it's very light, isn't it? But I can keep painting. Each time in between I'm letting go of the mouse and repressing it. It's getting darker. Now if I paint just once over here, it's very faint, but I keep painting on it, letting go of the mouse each time. It adds to it. That's because the flow is less than 100. It's only 23%. So each time I paint, it's only putting 23% of the density out there. But because the density is at something less than 100, no matter how many times I paint this, it will never get more than 50% density. So flow is how fast it goes down onto the image. Density is the max effect that you want on with the change you're about to make. Okay, let's try the last tool, which is the radial gradient. And you can see it automatically found that person too. But let's do a radial gradient. This is good for vignettes maybe, or you could select, actually if you wanted to, you could just select the eyes or the mouth. But let's start with maybe a vignette. Let's say when I click and drag, depending on where I move my mouse, it makes any circular shape that I want. I let go and I have a shape, then I can put my mouse over the center, I get the hand and I can drag it around. When I put my mouse over the edges, the dots on the edges, it will expand it and it will do it symmetrically. If I want to affect the one side only and not symmetrically, hold the Alt or Option key, and then I can affect just one side. Let's drag that back here. Now there's a feathering amount like the others, and same thing. It's going to be the most dense that I've allowed up to this line, and then it gradually fades out to that line. Okay, you can change the feathering over here. Notice it only moves the inside ring. Okay, now everywhere I change something, let's do that. And here's where you might soften somebody. You could take clarity, soften that image for a portrait. All right, now let's say, because I mentioned you can make multiple masks, right? So let's do another one. And this is where you might do a circled just for the eye. And like the linear, hover the mouse over this bottom one till you get that double arrow. I can rotate it so it matches the angle of her eye. Okay. Now I'll only show you this one. And it's a little hard to tell because I haven't zoomed in, but let's see what we can do to change that. Let's just change the whites of her eye and see if we can tell. Yeah, not with the mask there, but let's click on this mask so it, yeah, and that covers it up. But that, I'll zoom in and see if we can see it there. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so that changed that. And I repositioned my mask. Okay, but let's say I wanted to then darken the outside. Well, I can make a new mask, again with another radial gradient, in the same spot, or I'm going to delete that and show you this is a good place for taking this mask and saying duplicate and invert. Now see, everything outside the circle is red, and that's what's going to be affected. So let's, in this case, bring that stuff down, bring the highlights down, whites down. All right, now she stands out much better. So hopefully that will give you a lot of ideas and open up the possibilities available in Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom to the local adjustments you can make without even going into Photoshop.